Hello and welcome to Acadec Daily, Music Theory number 2. Today we're going to talk about ledger lines and movable clefs with a little bit of review. So let's review. If we have a single set of 5 lines with a clef, that is called a staff, and multiple staffs are called staves. And if we have a treble clef staff on top and a bass clef staff on bottom, we call that the grand staff. And if we remember from last time, we have our G clef, so this line is G, and our F clef. This line is F, the treble clef and bass clef. And we briefly mentioned about ledger lines, but we didn't actually see them in action. So ledger lines let us expand the staff to go above or below the 5 lines that are default there. And this pitch here, this is middle C, or also known as C4, and the little number denotes which octave it's in, because if you recall, there are multiple pitches with the same note name, so we use this number to differentiate if necessary. And these two notes here, despite looking like they're in different places, they're actually the same note, and we can see that G, F, E, D, C, and then if we start on F at the bottom, F, G, A, B, C. And these notes are the same, which is why it's called the middle C. And sometimes I think of it as just like right in the middle, because they unite the two clefs and it's almost symmetrical on either side. But we can't write it like this just because it makes it hard to read. Like if I were to put a D and I put it right here underneath the E line, that would look like a different note from if I put it right above the C line. So we keep them separate like this. We also have the other C's. So the C above C4 is C5 on the treble clef. And we could also just keep adding ledger lines to get to C5 from the bass clef, but it's just easier to write it in treble clef. That's why we have different clefs as well. And then going down an octave, we have C3 on the bass clef. And sure, we could go down ledger lines from the treble clef to get to C3, but it's more often that you'll see the clef change to bass clef, because that makes it easier to write. But be careful, because two notes that are right next to each other might not be in the same octave, and the numbers reset on C. So we'll go C4, D4, E4, F4, G4, A4, B4, but then the next note up will be C5. So you have to be careful with that. Well, let's figure out which note and octave will this be. Pause and try to figure it out. There we go, that's D4, and we know that because our middle C was C4, and we go right up one to D4. And if you got tricked and said D5, that is just something you have to remember. When you go up from a C, you keep it. When you go down, you lose the number. So if I had the C4 and I went down a note to right underneath that ledger line, that would be a B3. How about this one? Pause and figure it out. This one will be an A3, because if you recall, we have our C4 on the ledger line, and then right below that is B3. So this line here must be A3. And you can also see that it's an A by going F, G, A. And it's in the 3rd octave. Okay, we also have more clefs. We have more clefs. And this one isn't seen that often. It's called the alto clef. And it's used by some niche instruments. Really, the only one that it's practically used in is on the viola. So if you play viola, you'll see this one a lot. And it's called the C clef because it may have once been a stylized C. It doesn't really look like a C. Maybe you could see these little curvy things as backward Cs, but you just got to remember it's the C clef. And this is what's called a movable clef, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this note here will be a C, and this is the middle C, just like the one we saw before on the bass and treble clef on the grand staff. So try to figure out, if this middle line here is middle C, what note and octave is this note here? Pause and try to figure it out. This is an E4, because if we remember, middle C is a C4, so we go up to D4, and then this will be E4. How about this one? Pause and figure it out. Okay, this will be an F3, and we can know that because we have C4, B4, A4, C4, B3, A3, G3, F3. My bad. These are all 3s below the C4. And then we also have the tenor clef, and it follows the same exact rules. It just looks higher. And that means that the C4, the middle C, will be on this fourth line rather than the third line. And I trust that you can figure out where all the notes are. It's just all shifted up one. So remembering which C clef is which can sometimes be difficult. And that's because they look almost exactly the same, just one is higher than the other. And one trick that I sometimes use to remember them is to use the letters. Alto has the little bar in the middle of the A, so the C is on the middle. And T for tenor is, the line is on the top, so it's the further one up. And you got to be careful because a lowercase t has it in the middle, right? So you got to use the capital letters. But that is a nice tip you can use. So thanks for joining me on Acadec Daily Music Theory number 2. And we learned about ledger lines and movable clefs. Thank you.